I think we've got most everybody here, so we'll go ahead and get started, and anybody that misses the beginning or the end can see me after, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So for those of you that got to come to the South Carolina Golf Association Rules Seminar, match play wasn't necessarily talked about, but the new rules were talked about a lot. And the first thing I want to just mention is that in most cases the new rules and the rules in general are going to apply the same to match play and stroke play. We're going to talk about where they're different today in some different cases in both individual and four-ball match play. But in most cases, one of the other intents of the new rules was to simplify things like this, so hopefully this won't take us too long. So just a quick overview, kind of what we'll cover today. Some definitions that are specific to match play, that are different in stroke play, different types of match play, and then one in the middle there. For some, we're going to basically just define it and then skip it. Scoring in match play, how you score a match, and then we're going to go a little deeper later on especially in four-ball, on how you would score something like our inter-club matches or the CBLGA four-ball match play, which is a little different than the standard scoring you're going to see. Handicaps in match play, how they're calculated, and backspace, maybe. Well, handicaps in match play, how they're calculated and how they're applied. Differences between stroke and match play, and then finally, again, we're going to cover some of the four-ball match play differences. Four-ball match play, where there's 4 people involved, it's a little different than individual head-to-head match play. So, any quick questions off the top, or anything I might have skipped that, if I skip something that you want to talk about, please feel free to do that at the end. We'll have some time for questions. Okay, frequently used terms in match play. Anyone that's got an arrow next to it is a change for 2019. So we used to say a match that was tied is all square. Now we're just going to make it simple and use tied. So you're going to see in the scoring example I have, when it's tied it says AS for all square. Now you just put a T there or just a dash to indicate it's tied. Status of match, which is who's winning and all that kind of, who's up, who's down. That is now going to be score of match. Really not a big difference there, just trying to make it as simple as possible. That will also make it a little simpler when we talk about the score of a match where there's points as opposed to hole by hole. One up, if you're in a match play situation and your side is 1 ahead, we score hole by hole. If you're 1 hole ahead, you're 1 up. Halved or tied, which is going to be a match where it's tied at the end, that match would be halved. That's not always the end of the match. That could be the end of the match, or it could mean that you're going to extra holes. 2 and 1, that's an example of a way to express how a match finishes. If you're scoring and it's just whoever wins the match wins, that would be an example that the team would be 2 holes up with 1 hole to play. So in effect, the match is over. There's no way to catch up for the team that's behind. So 2 and 1, 3 and 2, those are examples. And so it would be so many holes up and so many holes to play. And obviously the second one always needs to be smaller than the first one. A term that is no longer in the rules, that you won't see on here, would be dormy. Dormy used to be when you were the player that was as many holes up as there were holes left, 3 up with 3 to play, you were dormy. They just took that out. Really has no meaning in terms of how the match finishes, so that's just avoids confusion there. Concession, this is going to be an important one. That could mean a hole that's conceded, a putt that's conceded, a match that's conceded. So different from stroke play where we count all our strokes up, a hole or a match can end, or a stroke can end at any point based on the people within that match. One note there, once a hole or a putt or a match is conceded, you cannot take it back and it cannot be refused either. So if you have a putt and your partner, here's a bit of strategy, you're playing in 4-ball match play, you have a putt from 5 feet and your putt for like 6, and your partner is in front of you and they have a putt for 3 on the same line. Good strategy of the other team would be to concede your putt for 6. If they do that, you cannot putt that putt. If you do putt that putt and it aids your partner, you will lose the hole. So little strategy thing there, but you can see things like that happen. Good. That would be if myself and Miss Emil are playing a match and we have a couple of tap-ins, we can say, do you want to go good? Would you like to? So in other words, both putts are conceded and we move on. You'll see that from time to time. You'll definitely see guys saying that all the time on the golf course. Yes?
But if you're conceding the putt and you pick it up so you're not helping your partner, after that hole's over, you can try that putt.
You can. Yeah, we'll talk about practicing between the hole and play, but you cannot aid your partner during the play of the hole. 4-ball and foursome, we mentioned those. Those are different types of match play where it's not one-on-one. Last change, we used to say whenever there was a rules dispute in a match, or somebody thought there was something, a rules infraction that happened, that you need to make a claim in a timely fashion. You need to say something right then. You can't wait till the next hole or the end of the match. If you do, then you lose your right to make a claim. Now we're just going to say ask for a ruling. So to kind of keep it consistent across what you would find in a stroke play format as well, making a claim, which is basically asking for a ruling, will now actually be asking for a ruling.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
The one up, so if you're
Yep.
on your card, that's still like 1+ or 1- or.
I'm going to show you 2 different ways to score it.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. We're going to talk scoring on a match play like that. I don't have a good example, but I can certainly put one together for you after the fact of a one where it will be scored a point per hole. But we'll talk briefly about that and then how to score it and things like that. So, okay. Any questions on terms? Any terms you didn't see? Yes.
That asking for a ruling, do you have to do it immediately, or can you hold on that?
You have to do it right away.
You do, okay.
Yeah, has to be done right away. And that's of particular importance in match play because every hole is an individual hole. In stroke play, and one of the things we're going to talk about in differences between stroke and match play, in stroke play you can say, I think I'm entitled to relief here, or I think this is a penalty, but I'm not sure I'm going to play the ball as it lies, and I'm also going to play it out. That's it's got a new number now. I have to look through here. It's like 21B2 or something like that. Used to be Rule 3.3. You can do that in stroke play, and you ask for a ruling when you finish. In match play, every hole is its own hole and has to be settled before the completion of that hole. If you don't make a claim before the completion of the hole, then we deem that claim to be null. Okay.
So
does that mean we have to call you?
Yeah.
You can if you need to. In most cases, hopefully you can get your rule book out and settle it yourselves. But yes, you can absolutely call an official if you need to. I would say, as a last resort, if you can. I mean, again, it's match play. It's going to be between the sides. If the sides agree and they're not intentionally breaking a rule, whatever they agree to is the final decision. Okay. As long as you're not intentionally breaking the rules. Okay, types of match play. Come on, stay with me here. Score real quick. Individual match play, which would be one-on-one, that's covered by Rule 3.2 under match play. Foursomes, which is alternate shot, would be 2 people on one team versus 2 on another, and they're alternating shots. We'll define it and we'll skip by it. That's very challenging, but that would be foursomes. And then 4-ball, which we're going to spend some time talking about here at the end, which is 4 players playing their own ball, 2 on one side against 2 on the other. So 2 competitors is one side, and the other 2 competitors are their opponents. Okay. Match play scoring. Hopefully. Look quickly, because this will go by. So there's a score here. You can see this is Brent's scorecard. He's keeping score of his match. He's all square through 1, which means he tied the hole, all square through 2. He lost the 3rd hole, so he's -1 or 1 down. You can do that as well. Tied this hole, so he's still 1 down. Suspense. 1 back. He won the 5th hole, so now his match is all square. And he won the 6th hole, so now he's 1 up. Lost the 7th hole, so he's back to all square. Won the 8th hole, so he was 1 up, and then he lost the 9th hole, and at the turn he was all square or tied. So he's really keeping track of what the match status is in relation to him. So each player would keep track of that,
But I
yes.
thought you just said the new terminology was put a T.
I couldn't find one that had a T yet. I had to use alternate.
Messing with
I know. I'm not.
What do you want? You want T's?
It's up to you. I mean, you can keep a dash. You're going to see another example here. At the end, all we're going to ask for. Oops.
Okay.
My other slide go. Oh, that's right. So let's go forward here. These 2 are out of order, but. So look at that. Okay, here's another example. So Here he just has a dash to indicate that they're tied. It really is for you to keep track of the match and know the status of the match. It's up to each player to know the status of the match at any time. And if you're not ever, if both players believe the match is all square, but it's really one of the sides is one up, and they complete the match and they say yes, they think it's all square, somebody wins the hole, and they would have been all square, but they believe they're one up. When you go and tell the committee or the scoring people he won one up, then we're all done. If you both agree to it, it's completed, it's posted, it's signed off, and you come back later and determine, oh wait a minute, I think I won that hole. Too late. You have to know at the time. So this is for you to keep track of. These are ways to score it. It's up to you to keep track of that when you're talking about a match where you're just going to have a winner at the end. Obviously, it'd be a little different when we talk 4-ball match play for CBLGA and interclub where there's a point per hole. We'll get into that. That's obviously going to be scored a little differently. But in terms of this is Sailor's keeping track of what his match is. And he has his score and the other person's score there. But in effect, this is really the only part that they're going to care about at the end, is who won the match.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously he won it because it's got a...
Matt,
Yes?
will we do scoring on the Golf Genius thing?
For the 4-ball match play, no. We'll use a paper scorecard for that because at the end of the season, if there are tiebreakers, we keep those paper scorecards. And we don't set it up like a league, so it's harder to go back and find them all. We'll use a paper one for that. I suspect we probably will for the interclub too, just from a sense of having... it's harder in match play because in the Golf Genius, when we're doing the live scoring, we're really only asking for one person to keep track of it. We only want one person to keep track of it. In a match play situation, we want both sides to be keeping track. So that's an instance where a paper scorecard is probably more effective. It's more appropriate. Okay? Okay.
And Matt, still, everybody should turn in a score for the round, even if they picked up on a hole.
Yes, absolutely. The only time that would not be true, you could post a 9-hole score if your match ends before hole 13, which can happen. That would be a 6 and 5 win if you're scoring at home. If you only played 12 holes, you could still post the 9-hole score. You could not paste the 18-hole score. You should write down when you're keeping track and you're keeping track of your score. For posting, you should write down what you most likely have made, even if you were conceded a 3 or your partner is out, or your opponent is out of the hole, they're going to make 8, you're on the green putting for 4. Don't write down your maximum, write down whatever you would have made. If it's a short putt, write down 4. If it's a long putt, write down 5. Use your best judgment there, but yes, you should post all your scores in match play. Match play is postable, assuming you've played the requisite number of holes, which would be 7 for 9, post a 9-hole score, and 13 to be able to post an 18-hole score. Okay, match play handicaps. So match play handicaps, we play stroke play, you get your handicap, right? And if there's multiple tees, we may adjust the handicap down, but in effect, you're getting your handicap from the set of tees you're playing. You get all your shots, unless there's a format where you take a percentage. But you're going to get your percentage based on the format. In match play, it's going to be stroked off the lowest person in the group. They're going to go down to 0. So we're never going to see these examples because they're not up long enough, but example 1, golfers A's course handicap is 6 and B is 22. Golfer A would get 0 strokes and golfer B gets 16 for that match. So it would be the higher handicap minus the lower handicap. The difference is the number of strokes given to the higher handicap. Okay. There's another example here. 12 and 22. The 12 gets 0 and the 22 would get 10 strokes. In 4-ball, same thing applies, but you're going to do it with all 4. Doesn't matter who's on what team. You're going to subtract the lowest player of the 4's handicap to get each player's handicap. So in this instance, we have a 6 and a 15 playing a 7 and a 9. Player A is the 6. They will be 0. There you can see it finally. Player B was a 15. They're going to be 9. They're going to be 15 minus that low score, which is 6. That number, which is 6. Player C was a 7, so they'll go down to be a 1. Player D was a 9. Now they're a 3. The reason that's important is how we allocate handicap strokes. The handicaps on the scorecard, 1 through 18, are set up not so much as it's the hardest hole. It may be the hardest hole for you, or it may not. It's set up as the biggest differential, or the biggest difficulty difference between your scratch player and your higher handicap, or over a range of handicaps. The lower handicap you are, sorry, the higher handicap you are, the harder the hole is in relation to your low handicap competitors. So the number one handicap hole in effect is the hole where, when you look at scores over a course of time, a lower handicap has a better score than a higher handicap by the widest margin to par over the golf course. So that's where we apply those strokes. Again, looking at the handicaps is how we've gotten them down to the lowest handicap is now a 0, and the highest handicap is getting the most shots. So the top 8 holes or so where they get shots are the 8 holes where the difference between low and high handicappers are most prominent. So that's where they'll get their strokes, and that's why it's important to subtract that lower handicap from all the others. Any questions on that, how we allocate those strokes or why we do it that way? Okay. Okay, again, that was the other match play scoring example. Stroke versus match play rules. Key differences in how we look at it. One of the most important things I always like to say is, in a stroke play event, you have fellow competitors. You're all competing against each other. In a match, you have an opponent. It's 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. Those are your opponents. We mentioned asking for a timely ruling and Rule 20.1C3. That was formerly Rule 3.3. You cannot do that in match play. That one basically says if you're not sure how to proceed, you play 2 balls. Tell someone you're going to play 2 balls and tell them which one you want to count. And then you ask for a ruling as soon as you see an official. Helps us keep play moving when there's not officials all over the golf course. Can't do that in match play. If you feel there's been a rules infraction, you must ask for it in a timely fashion. So you can't have that happen on hole number 2 and then mention it on hole number 4 when your team gets 2 down. All right? That has to happen at the time of the infraction. Okay? Or at least the time when it's discovered. We talked about concessions. Again, a putt can be conceded, a stroke can be conceded, a hole can be conceded, a match can be conceded. Don't really see matches get conceded very often, unless there's an injury of some sort. But putts and holes can be conceded. And again, just to reiterate, if you have a putt or a hole that's conceded and you need to mark a score for that hole, please put down what you would most likely have made on that hole rather than what your maximum score on the hole is. Okay. Better late than never. In stroke play, if you're late to the tee for a tournament, you don't get to play, right? In match play, as long as you make it before they get to the second tee, you can still compete, and that's in a head-to-head match. In a 4-ball match or a foursome, well, in a 4-ball match only, not a foursome match, a side can be represented by 1 player in a 4-ball match. So if your partner's late to the tee, you can play without them, and they can join at the conclusion of any hole. They can't join in the middle of any hole.
Matt, I have a question, but how late do you mean by late? I mean, you have 5 minutes to get there. If you're late over 5 minutes on that tee to play, then you get a 2-stroke penalty? Or what is it?
If you're late to the tee, the side will begin, and then if they get to the second tee box, you lose the match. The match is conceded.
So the other player has to show by the second tee, and if they don't, then they...
Not in 4-ball.
Not
Head-to-head.
They could
If
literally
we're playing a
have
match.
one person play the whole way.
Play the whole. You can get advice from your partner, yourself obviously, or either of the caddies if there's caddies involved in that, but nobody else. Okay.
But there's no penalty if you ask distance, right?
No, distance is public information. Public information is not considered advice.
Okay.
They have a watch on, they have a rangefinder, that's public information. They should give you that information, absolutely, yeah. And there's no reason, you can't touch someone else's equipment, but you could go look in their bag and see what club they had, if you wanted to know that. You can look, you just can't pull out clubs and start looking to see which one they had.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
I have a question regarding
Okay.
advice. Because watching some of the pro tournaments, if my opponent, my partner's behind me, watching me and trying to show me where to putt, for instance, there's no penalty for that, is there?
Not until you address the ball.
Okay, so once I address the ball, then...
Once you start addressing the ball, in effect, the same rule that applies for a caddy applies for a partner. Okay, in terms of you've seen on the PGA Tour when they stand behind, the same rule applies for a partner. It's anybody on your side.
Good to know.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want to do that. Yeah. Okay. 4-ball match play. So a little different situation here. You're going to find this a lot, and again, part of the reason I'm sure a lot of you are here is because you're going to be playing in the 4-ball match play opportunities we have this year, where there's multiple players. it can be a little different in terms of how penalties are assessed and who can play or if the hole is lost. So penalties assessed to a player. Penalties assessed to a player, whether they're shot penalties or, as we talked about, in some of those two shot penalties where they would be loss of hole. It's not loss of hole, but that player is disqualified from the rest of the hole. So in other words, if you were to be assessed a 2-stroke penalty for something that happened, you would be disqualified from that hole, but your partner could continue. Okay? It's very rare that we have a situation where the side is disqualified from a play, let me find my little sheet here. From the hole. The best example, there are 2 examples specifically. One that deals with the number of clubs you have. That would be if you have 14 clubs, more than 14 clubs, it's kind of a tricky, I was going to leave this one out because it's kind of confusing, but let's say on the 3rd hole that you discover that you had 15 clubs in your bag, and your team is 3 up at that point. You've won the first 3 holes. As soon as you discover that, it's loss of hole for up to 2 holes, and it's assessed at the time of the match. So you would in effect be 1 up at that time. So that would be loss of hole for a side. That would be one example. The other one would be the one that Ms. Howland mentioned, which is advice or indicating line of play, where you or your caddy would be giving aid that's not allowed by the rules to either yourself or your partner, and that would be loss of hole as well. Disqualification is rare. I can't even think of a situation we would encounter. There's a list of what they are, but I looked through it and I can't think of a single situation where we would have that happen in any of our match play situations in 4-ball match play. Okay? We talked briefly about handicaps. Are there any questions about how we do handicaps for 4-ball match play? Okay, just want to give an opportunity there. Particularly in the CBLGA match play, handicaps tend to be relatively close, so the number of strokes is reduced significantly when you look at the matches. You have at least a couple of players, one on each side, that typically is going to have almost no shots. So it usually works out that way. Scoring for 4-ball match play. In a situation where we have a season-long period where we're keeping track of the scores, we don't want the match to end before 18. Right? We want to have all 18 holes of matches 1 through 6 or whatever the case may be eligible for play. So you'll never, in a 4-ball match play, in the 2 versions that we have, you'll never have a result of 2-1 or 3-2 or 4-3. You're always going to play all 18 holes. And so to make sure that all 18 holes matter, we assign 1 point per hole rather than a 1 up or a 1 down. So 1 point per hole. If the hole is tied, you're not all square, each side would get a half a point. So rather than keeping track on that 4-ball card of all square, 1 up, you need to have both sides represented. You have all 4 names on the card, we always do that. And then under each one, you'll keep track of the number of points they get. Every hole that's halved, each team gets a half a point. Every hole that's 1, the team that wins gets 1, and the team that loses the hole gets 0. At the end, it should add up to 18. So 10-8, 9-9, 11-7. If you don't add up to 18, then look back and it's likely that you put a half where a 1 should be or something like that, or 2 1s instead of a 1 and a 0 if it doesn't add up to 18 or 2 zeros, I guess. That's going to be true of our interclub matches as well as the CBLGA 4-ball match play. I don't recall any of my interclub rules, people. Is there an extra point for the match in interclub? No? Okay. In the men's side, there's an extra point. There's 19 points for each match. So if a match ends tied 9-9 and you have an extra point for winning the match, then it's 9.5 to 9.5 or 19 points. If you win the match 10-8, you would get an extra point, it'd be 11. So if that's ever something that comes up, that would be another, that would be, that's split or given the same way an individual point would be for the whole. Okay? Questions on those? Okay. I put this slide on here as well, just our local rules. They will change a little bit this year because some of the things that were on there are now in the rules. So just quickly to go over those, a couple of things that have changed. Stones in a bunker is that you can now move a loose impediment in a bunker, so we don't have to have that rule anymore, which we typically do. So a twig or a leaf or or a stone in a bunker, you can now remove that as long as your ball doesn't move, doesn't make your ball change position. The other one is distance measuring devices. Up to this beginning of this year, we had to put a local rule in allowing rangefinders or other yardage only defining devices. That's now a part of the rules, and so that won't appear on there either. I think those are the main ones. The other ones that we have, as a refresher, drop zones on hole 4 and 10. Those are for tee shots in the water on either of those holes. Out of bounds on hole number 4, again, where the stake with the blue cap is, that's where the wall begins out of bounds, and the next stake with the blue cap at the towards the green side where that is, that's where the wall stops being out of bounds and the stakes become out of bounds again. And please remember that out of bounds, when a wall defines out of bounds, that wall is out of bounds. Okay. Same thing for a fence. I don't know if anybody saw a couple weeks ago, Phil Mickelson hit his ball up against a temporary fence that was defining out of bounds, and the ball was in bounds, but the fence was out of bounds. And so he couldn't move the fence, and he tried to play it, tried to hit it underneath it, and got caught in the fence and went out of bounds. So then he had to replace it, and he got the second one out. But any object that defines out of bounds is out of bounds, okay? And your ball is out of bounds when the entire ball is off the golf course. So, and then hole number 9, this relates to the fence, stone fence here by the green, as well as the cart path. In those situations, if your ball is impeded by the cart path or that fence, you are entitled to stance and swing relief from that. It's not for your line of play. If you're further down the hill and it doesn't interfere with your stance or swing, there's no relief afforded, and you must find your ball in all cases in this example. But you're entitled to equidistant relief on the whole side of the cart path, on the playing side of the cart path, I would say. Okay, movable obstructions near a putting green. This is a Cliffs local rule, and we use it at all Cliffs courses, which is basically states that if your ball is within 2 club lengths of, in effect, it's mostly sprinkler heads, and a movable obstruction that is no more than 2 club lengths away from the edge of the green, and it's on your line of play, you are entitled to relief no closer to the hole up to 1 club length away. But all the conditions must be met. The obstruction must be 2 club lengths or less away from the green. You must be 2 club lengths or less from the obstruction, and it must be on your line of play or interfere with your stance and swing. Then you can get relief from that object. Okay, so all 3 conditions have to be met.
Back to moving something in a bunker and your ball moves.
Yep.
Penalty and replace it?
Yes.
1 stroke?
1 stroke. Yep. Yep. If it looks like it might move it, it's probably better just to leave it.
So what if it's a rake? That's
A rake is an immovable obstruction. There's no penalty there. If your ball is interfered with, it's only the natural things. You can move those now, but if your ball moves, the same as on the golf course, if there's a stick next to your ball, you pull it away and the ball moves, you replace it, and there's a 1 stroke penalty. Now that applies in a bunker as well. It applies in a hazard as well.